The Maguuma Jungle is one of the most iconic locations in the Guild Wars franchise and is one of my personal favorites, containing so many different areas with incredibly beautiful locations and exciting pieces of content to engage with. When it comes to the Maguuma Jungle in Guild Wars 2, it can be a little confusing, with the main part of the Maguuma Jungle also being referred to as the Tarnished Coast, as it is in that region of the world, with the eastern part of the Maguuma Jungle mechanically being a part of Maguuma, but actually being a mix of the coastal areas of the Sea of Sorrows and the swampy foothills of the Steamspur Mountains. And today, I just want to throw it all in together and include Bloodtide Coast, which is technically Kraitbane, but has some of those eastern Maguuma influences, and even has a slight vibe of the Shiver Peaks going on. So for a variety of regions that have a lot going on, let's highlight a lot of stuff and go over my top 30 favorite things found within the Maguuma Jungle and the Bloodtide Coast. In the number 30 spot is the Murkvale Bridge. Murkvale is the southwestern corner of the Mount Maelstrom map, and it is very interesting for a lot of different reasons, where it also hosts one of the entrances to the Straits of Devastation in the southwestern part of the Steamspur Mountains, where we have Fort Trinity, and it continues into Ore. It is also basically at the base of Mount Maelstrom, and there's a lot of just interesting things you can interact with around here, and a very interesting NPC with Crusader Aliana who you can chat with. But I just really like this bridge coming over this area, where it does play a pretty big part in a personal story mission, which is always exciting to see random objects around Tyria play a part in the personal story. But maybe one of the most interesting things about this bridge is how there is an unsuspicious rabbit just sitting on the bridge and basically just hanging out and not being suspicious at all. In the number 29 spot is the Jeztar Falls. This is in the southern part of the Metrica province, and anybody who has played an Asuran character or has played through the Asuran starting area should be very familiar with this area. For anyone who started playing Guild Wars 2 way back in the day and remembers the pre-launch trailers for Guild Wars 2, might have a little bit of nostalgia for this place just because of a cool scene in that trailer with some Asura jumping over this little area. And whenever I come through this little area, I always enjoy jumping over this place too, because it's fun to just do a few jumps instead of just running along where you need to go. The waterfall itself is really beautiful looking, and I love how it comes out into Loch Just and then continues further north / there's a river coming from the north down into this area. And I just love all the water around here, especially if you dive deep into it, because then you can go underneath the waterfall and find this little cave that has an event going on and also a personal story mission that takes place here as well. In the number 28 spot is Tequatl the Sunless, most likely the most iconic world boss in all of Guild Wars 2 in the modern day. This is an iconic boss in the Sparkfly Fin, which way back in the day was a pretty basic boss, but just during Living World Season 1 got a major update to it that made it incredibly challenging, which it's now pretty easy nowadays, but it's actually still decently challenging, and also added a ton of rewards to it, where this is probably the single most played world boss and the most played event in all of Guild Wars 2, as so many people every single day fight Tequatl the Sunless. And when it comes to the boss fight itself, it is actually pretty cool, and I love a lot of the cinematic features that are incorporated into this fight, with Tequatl breaking the little fort at the start, and then also just flying off during every phase. When it comes to the fight mechanically, this is mostly just because I've done Tequatl so many times, but I find it a little bit boring. Where on paper it is definitely a good fight, but after having done it a few hundred times, it kind of just throws it a little bit lower on this list compared to where it would be for a lot of other people. In the number 27 spot is Stormbluff Isle, where this is an isle in the northern central part of the Bloodtide Coast, which is a pretty cool location where I love coming here through the personal story, and there's also a dragon response mission that takes place starting at this location, which I've always thought is kind of interesting to see the development of the world through that response mission. Bloodtide Coast features a lot of pirate activity going on in the entire map, and it's cool to see all the pirates around here, but of course we got the Lionguard combating the pirates, and they primarily do so starting out of Stormbluff Isle with their base Stormbluff Beacon inside of it, which is just an incredibly cool lighthouse, which I've always thought was really cool to see off at the distance when you're exploring Bloodtide Coast, and then coming up to this area to basically be next to the beacon and to interact with all the Lionguard around here and the different objectives around here. In the number 26 spot is Firebreak Fort and the Ashen Waste as well, where primarily I just want to take a look at the fort because it is just so incredible looking, and I love how it is in the shadow of Mount Maelstrom right down at the base, where you can look up at Mount Maelstrom and it is very intimidating looking, but then you can also just find a little bit of a safe refuge from that intimidating mountain inside of this fort. But I love all the areas around here, and as you expand into the Ashen Waste with the Safari and the Nightmare Court camp off in that area, and it's just an aesthetically gorgeous area, and there's just something about this fort being placed in this spot specifically where it combines with the aesthetics of the fort into the aesthetics of the environment around it to create just a really cool looking location that I think fits very well into this map and into Guild Wars 2 as a whole. In the number 25 spot is the Mabon Market. This is the central crafting area in Caledon Forest, as every starting map has a little crafting area for players to learn how to craft outside of the cities and whatnot. Where I really love the location of this area along the bay with all the water, and you can see the cool wall off in the distance. And I love the events that go on around here and how it connects to other parts of the map, and it is integrated very well into the map as a whole for new Safari players exploring into the map further from the starting area. Also love all the services around here, and it is a pretty nice spot to hang out at if you want to do some crafting and whatnot. And while I've always loved this location in Guild Wars 2, especially since I am a Safari main and I have a lot of nostalgia with just being in this location, with the Secrets of the Obscure expansion, it became a little bit cooler as we learned the Mabon Market was actually named after Mabon, who disguised himself and played some sort of part in this area of the world, and in disguise interacted with the Safari and the Tengu and the other people around here, and this market ended up being named after him. In the number 24 spot is the Dominion of Winds Wall, where we can take a look at that cool wall that I just mentioned earlier, which stretches through most of the part of the eastern end of the Caledon Forest, where the Dominion of Winds is a very cool area in the lore of Guild Wars 2, and is a location that many players throughout the history of Guild Wars 2 have wanted to explore for a very long time now, and hopefully one day in the future we will be able to. And this wall can be found in the Kessex Hills and also in the Lion's Arch, and in both of those areas they are cool as well, but for me it's just particularly cool in the Caledon Forest because it does play a pretty big part in this map, and even has a couple of map completion objectives connected to it with a really cool bridge as well. And we even have an area of the world called the Dominion of Winds here in Caledon Forest, which is cool to have a small little area named after the bigger area as a whole, and maybe is basically the closest we may ever get to seeing what is behind this wall. But it has just served as a monumental landmark throughout Guild Wars 2 that new players and old players look at to wonder what is beyond it. In the number 23 spot is Mount Gnashington. This is the giant mountain in the Brisbane Wildlands where Skritsburg is located. Skritsburg as a whole is just incredibly cool with so many different tasks and other map completion objectives and just a ton of Skrit that you can interact with and learn a lot about the Skrit here. Where it's really fun to explore through the entire mountain, but then it's also fun to look at the mountain from the outside because it is a pretty big part of the Brisbane Wildlands and takes up a very large portion of the map with the mountain itself and also the foothills coming out of the mountain. I especially love the waterfall that is coming out of Mount Gnashington and continuing into the Brisbane Wildlands and down towards Loch Jest, which we talked about earlier, and altogether it's just one of the best mountains in all of Guild Wars 2. In the number 22 spot is Conundrum Cubed. This is a jumping puzzle located in the northwestern corner of Mount Maelstrom and is a pretty interesting, albeit relatively simple and straightforward jumping puzzle to complete, where there's actually a somewhat confusing mechanic where you have to go through some portals, but once you remember the route through the portals or follow a little guide or kind of just like smash your way through it a little bit for a couple minutes, you can easily get to the end, where the rest of the jumps are pretty basic and straightforward but still really fun, where you got some spike traps and some log traps that will try to harm you, kind of similar to the Obsidian Sanctum in World vs. World. But I've always found this area just very interesting looking, where we have all the cubes around here given the name of the jumping puzzle, and I've always found it fascinating to explore, which combined with the jumping puzzle mechanics as a whole just makes this a really fun area to come to. In the number 21 spot is the Shattered Henge, and this is just a really cool area located in the southwestern end of the Brisbane Wildlands. And I love a lot of the different events, especially with the giants around here, and I love all the aesthetics with the Thaumanova Reactor stuff going on, and I just find this entire area super cool, But for players who played through the original Guild Wars, you should be very familiar with the Henge of Dinravi in the original Guild Wars, as well as for anyone who has played through Living Rose Season 3, you should be decently familiar with it as well, where it's just a pretty large location in the original Guild Wars that served as one of the major hubs during the Prophecies campaign as you progress through the story, and has played a pretty big part in the lore and story of Kryda and the Prophecies campaign, and to an extent the Guild Wars franchise as a whole. But as somebody who played Guild Wars 2 before the original Guild Wars, it was really interesting to come to this location and kind of see how it was in the past as someone who first experienced it in Guild Wars 2. And because of that reason, it just really stands out for me, and I consider it a pretty iconic part of the Brisbane Wildlands. In the number 20 spot is the Astrozintli Forelands. This is a pretty major area in the northern central part of the Sparkfly Fen, and there are a ton of renowned hearts and points of interest and a bunch of events to defend this massive area, a massive area that is primarily occupied by the Hylic. And there's a lot of cool stuff going around here, but there's two big things I care about a lot. The first is how there are a bunch of crafting trainers located in this area, which is not something we see too much outside of major cities, and also the crafting hubs in starting areas, which just makes this area feel even more special to me. But then we also got a lot of Hylic stuff going on all around this area, where there's even a Hylic vendor where you can begin progressing some of the weapon skins related to the Hylic, and the entire area basically serves as kind of a capital hub for the Hylic of Central Tyria, where if we were to ever have, say, a Hylic playable race, this would basically in lore be the location that would serve as the main hub, or maybe even the main starting area for the Hylic in Guild Wars 2. In the number 19 spot is Naulshead Refuge and the Weeping Isle, where these are two areas right next to each other, so I thought I would bundle them in, where Naulshead Refuge is a little point of interest in Ventry Bay, where this is a sheltered village that was once home to the Soundless, but unfortunately they were forced out by the Nightmare Court, and you can find a very interesting Asuran by the name of Jono who you can chat with, and there's also a tattered journal nearby. And I've just always found this area a little bit interesting and kind of sad, but also very beautiful with the little buildings around here. Where we then have the Weeping Isle, which is the primary Soundless outpost in all of Tyria, where for anyone who doesn't know, the Soundless are Savari who are peaceful but don't follow the teachings of Ventari and of the Pale Tree, where to some extent they are kind of similar to the Nightmare Court, but instead of being evil and hostile and trying to kill everybody, the Soundless are just basically trying to live their own lives and build their own future together, where they are a relatively small population and can primarily be found at this place, but there are Soundless throughout Tyria that you can stumble upon every now and then. And as a Savari character, I always find it interesting to come and find these people, because while they have separated themselves from the dream, they are still Savari and you can still work with them. And the number 18 spot is the Kraitbane Haven and the Lionguard Waystation, another two areas both located in Caledon Forest, both right next to each other, but this time in the northeastern end of Caledon Forest, where I really love Lionguard Havens in Guild Wars 2, and I think Kraitbane Haven is a particularly cool haven that you can find in the Caledon Forest, with a really cool vista that you can find, and just a bunch of services around here important for Savari characters. But further west out of Kraitbane Haven, you can find the Lionguard Waystation, which is a Lionguard outpost, but isn't a haven to the same extent as Kraitbane Haven, where it doesn't have large fortified walls and a large amount of Lionguard protecting this area. But it's still a pretty important location along the Lion Road towards the Grove and also towards Metrica Province and Radasum. And I've just always found that this location in particular really interesting just because of how different it is, but how similar it is to all the havens around Tyria, where I especially love the bridges around here and then the fort itself with the small walls and tower. In the number 17 spot is the Thaumanova Reactor in the northwestern corner of the Metrica Province. This is an area that most players should be familiar with, as it is the final part of the Metrica Province with a pretty big event going on here and a massive fire elemental world boss, where there's even a fractal that takes place in here to show you what happened to this area, where this is a reactor that the Astorea were using that exploded and caused a lot of devastating magical disturbances in this area and around it, which you can even see it impacting part of the Brisbane Wildlands, which we saw a little bit of earlier. But I've always found the reactor lore-wise and story-wise incredibly interesting, but then the reactor itself to be able to explore through this massive complex to be really interesting as well, where I love the tiny little jumping puzzles that are a part of spawning the steam ogre. And I just always love coming through this area and fighting through some of the interesting monsters that are appearing inside of the reactor, and then also fighting the fire elemental world boss itself. In the number 16 spot is Fort Cadence. This is in the northern area of Sparkfly Fen and is right next to the Shattered Keep, which is inside of Fort Cadence, which is an interesting area with some ghost pirates and an interesting hero challenge that you can complete. But Fort Cadence itself is just very interesting, as it is an old fort that is basically in ruins, but is still somewhat used by the Vigil as they fight against some of the dead ships coming in, where this serves as an important strategic location for the Vigil in order to protect the Bloodtide Coast and further up towards Lion's Arch from this specific angle, where you can even see the Vigil fighting against a dead ship every now and then, which is just an incredible event to experience. But then the fort itself is just incredible to look at. In the number 15 spot is Calx's Hideout. This is an area in the southeastern corner of the Metrica province that many players might actually not know about, because it's a little difficult to get to and doesn't have any map completion objectives inside of it. Where to get to this place, you have to interact with Parna and complete some of the events around here to make sure that the gate is activated and not destroyed by the script. Where once the gate is activated, you can come into this area to explore Calx's Hideout, which is one of Parna's ancestors. Where this is just an Asuran lab that is incredibly cool looking, with a really cool skylight and a ton of lava all around here. And I just love coming through here to do some of these events, because there are some events that haven't been completed too many times throughout the history of Guild Wars 2, just because this is a relatively obscure area that not many players even know about. In the number 14 spot is Morgan's Leap and Dark Reverie, a 2-for-1 spot for a 2-for-1 jumping puzzle, where Morgan's Spiral in the southeastern corner of the Caledon Forest is just a really cool area that I love a lot. But it also features a jumping puzzle, which is one of the first jumping puzzles that I spent a ton of time with back in the day when I first started playing Guild Wars 2, where it's really fun to climb your way up the spiral and eventually get to the final chest. But then from the final chest, you can enter a second jumping puzzle that you can only get to through completing the original jumping puzzle, or by using a shortcut if another player is inside of the Dark Reverie or getting teleported in by another player. Where Morgan's Leap is a pretty easy jumping puzzle, but Dark Reverie is significantly more difficult, especially for newer players to complete, especially with all the mobs around here that are super dangerous. And the Dark Reverie jumping puzzle is really fun to complete and is aesthetically incredible, and similar to Morgan's Leap is a jumping puzzle that I've completed a lot in my time playing Guild Wars 2, and is a location that I particularly enjoy. In the number 13 spot is Caledon Haven. This is another haven located in Caledon Forest, and this is just one of my favorite havens in the entire game across all of the maps that feature havens. It is located in Trader's Green and is a pretty important part of the map and the Lion Road, where it's right next to Honto Trading Post, which is an incredible little Tengu and Asuran trading post, and is also right next to the town of Cathal, which is a Savari town in this map, which hopefully I pronounced the name correctly, but I've always loved this little town. And because of these two locations, this haven is just even more important because it serves as a defensive and protective force in this area of the world to defend against the Nightmare Court and any other threats that may be present in this part of the map. And when it comes to the haven itself, it is just another really cool haven where all of them are pretty similar but are also really unique in their own ways, and I just like this one in particular. In the number 12 spot is the Hidden Garden. This is a massive jumping puzzle located in Mount Maelstrom that many players should be familiar with, just because it tends to be one of the more popular jumping puzzles in the Guild Wars 2 community, where in order to get to this place, you have to fight one of 4 different guardians found in specific spots around the map in order to open a portal to be teleported to this special hidden location, which already that is really cool, and I love having this entire massive area just hidden away from the rest of the map, which is why it's called the Hidden Garden. But then when it comes to this entire environment, it is just one of the most stunning locations in Guild Wars 2, and I love how it looks so much. And when it comes to the jumping puzzle, it is also really fun, where there are a few distinct areas that you can jump through related to the 4 different elements, and you can collect a few different things in order to open the final chest in the center of the map with the Savari hanging out here. But then we have the namesake of the garden with the hidden garden itself that you can find, which is just an incredibly cool area and is even a place that players can upgrade and utilize with the Kudzu collection, as well as something from Living World Season 3, which I think is incredible. And the number 11 spot is Astorea and the Verdence, basically the entire little starting area for the Silvari. And this is mostly because I find this entire area incredibly nostalgic, but also still incredibly fun to play through. Whereas somebody who loves the Silvari and has played as a Silvari for a very long time, I just have so many memories of hanging out in this area of the world, completing all the different objectives, and just learning about Guild Wars 2 as I began playing it way back in the day. And I'm sure many players probably feel very similar, whether or not you started playing back in 2012 or started playing more recently. If you are a Silvari player, you probably have many memories with this place, as it is some of the first adventures that you did in Guild Wars 2. And Astoria as a whole is just a really cool town to start out of, and the Verdence is just a really beautiful and fun area to explore as you complete the first task in Guild Wars 2 and find some of the first map completion objectives that you need to complete before heading out into the rest of Tyria and everything that waits for you beyond. In the number 10 spot is the Morgan Spiral Shipwreck, back towards Morgan Spiral and the Morgan's Leap jumping puzzle, but instead of going up, we can go down into the water around here, which I think is something that many players have not done, because there's nothing really taking you down into this water, where there's one event that spawns down here with a big risen Hylic, but he just comes up out of the water and players have to fight him on the land. But should you be a slightly adventurous explorer, you can come down into the water and find a couple of really cool things, including this shipwreck here, which I've always found to be just really cool looking. But then we also got a really interesting sea monster crab-like creature that is also hanging out right next to the shipwreck and is maybe responsible for the shipwreck, and this might just be an example of storytelling hidden out in the open world. But I've always just found that the shipwreck really cool to find in an area that not many players actually come to. In the number 9 spot is Spelunker's Delve, still in the Verdence, as we have been talking about for the last couple of spots. We have this jumping puzzle, which is a very fun jumping puzzle for me, and is also kind of a jumping puzzle that is hidden away from the rest of the map, and most players don't stumble upon this until they explicitly come to find this jumping puzzle to complete an achievement or to work on some other thing. But some players do stumble upon this as they explore this area in depth, or just fall into the hole that opens up into this incredible area that is just really cool looking. And as somebody who's a big nature and Silvari person, I just find this area aesthetically very stunning and just incredibly comfy and cozy to jump through. Where the jumping puzzle itself is really fun to complete, and I love navigating my way through here and eventually getting to the end. Where when it comes to jumping, it is just a really phenomenal jumping puzzle that I think most players in Guild Wars 2 enjoy to some extent. In the number 8 spot is the Aleem's Penance Crypt. This is an unmarked location in the Sparkfly Fen, which I've just always found really cool. Where I actually didn't know about this place until more recently with my Let's Play series as I explored through this area, and I've talked about it in another video since then. Where there's nothing really going on in this location, but it does play a part in a couple of events around here where you can defend the crypt, but should you be unsuccessful with defending the crypt, a giant risen knight will come out of it and haunt everybody in this area, where this is a very powerful boss that anybody who is a solo player probably struggles a little bit with navigating through this area when this boss is alive. But the crypt itself is just really cool, and you can't access it all the time until that boss spawns. But should you be able to come into this area, you can just find a really cool crypt that you can dive deep into and just enjoy a little bit of that type of atmosphere. And the number 7 spot is Mount Maelstrom, as in the mountain itself that the entire map is named after, where Mount Maelstrom is the most prominent part of the Mount Maelstrom map for obvious reasons, and it's just an incredibly cool mountain in the Steamspur Mountains, and is the primary reason that this area of the world is like it is, because of how it erupted. Where I love seeing Mount Maelstrom as you explore around the map, and I love going to all the different areas around here as you eventually work your way up the mountain to explore some of the parts in it, but then you can go into the volcano itself where you have the Mega Destroyer World boss and a few different map completion objectives. and I just love completing all that content around the mountain, especially when you climb up to the top of the mountain and then you can look down into it, and you also have an incredible vista, where I always love climbing up to the top of the mountain and then back in the day jumping in, and then a little bit less back in the day jumping in and gliding, and now more recently, but still kind of back in the day, jumping in with my Griffin or Skyscale and just flying around this entire area. And the number 6 spot is the Verdence Shipwreck. Going back to the Verdence once again, this is another shipwreck similar to the one by Morgan Spiral, but this time is basically on land and is located in the back of a cave in the Verdence, where I really love coming into this area and just seeing the Risen around here and fighting against them. But I remember coming into this cave and then just looking over and seeing this shipwreck just kind of hanging out here, where there isn't too many reasons to come into this cave, and I believe it does play a part in one story mission, and there might be an event that takes place here, but the cave itself is just really cool looking, and then seeing the shipwreck just hanging out inside of the cave with all the little decorations around here as well adding onto it is just a really cool experience. And the number 5 spot are the Tears of Etlauco. This is a mini dungeon located in the northwestern corner of the Caledon Forest, and is just an incredible mini dungeon in Guild Wars 2 that can be a little annoying to complete if other players are around here, because you really have to work together in order to get through this area, where you need to throw a boulder at the gong in order to open the door, and then you explore an area with a bunch of dangerous Hylic and some spec traps that you have to sneak past in order to get to this very cool looking area with this giant head, and a puzzle that you have to complete by using the 3x3 pressure plates here in order to use the Tears of Etlauco to create the same design that is found on the head, until you complete 4 of the designs to light up 4 of the torches to get to the final chest. And I've just always found the puzzles in this area to be particularly cool because they are pretty unique compared to a lot of other stuff in Guild Wars 2. And I just love the vibes and aesthetics of this entire area as you come through it and complete the puzzle, and it does truly feel like a mini dungeon. In the number 4 spot is Specs Laboratory. This is a jumping puzzle located in Caledon Forest, which is just one of my favorite jumping puzzles in Guild Wars 2, where it is in a CERN lab located in Caledon Forest, which is kind of interesting to see. But of course the CERN and the Savari are deeply connected in multiple different ways. And I love the vibes of this area with all the lava and the CERN tech around here, and I particularly love the jumping puzzle, where it is very basic and straightforward, where you're basically just jumping from platform to platform. But I find this area to be a very solid spot for players who are playing through Guild Wars 2 for the first time and are interested in jumping puzzles but maybe struggle with them a little bit, because this spot serves as a good spot to learn how to jump a little bit quicker, where we have a few different checkpoints throughout this area, so should you fall, you can easily get back up to the checkpoint. But the timing aspect of this puzzle, where you have to get from checkpoint to checkpoint in a certain amount of time from starting at each checkpoint, serves as a good way to practice some very simple and straightforward jumps, but under a time constraint, allowing players to basically learn how to move in Guild Wars 2 a little bit better and how to complete jumping puzzles a little bit better. But really, I just love this jumping puzzle a lot, and I love this entire area a lot. And the number 3 spot is Risewild Green. Speaking of areas that I love a lot, this is just a location in the Bloodtide Coast, which is very Savari themed and is very hidden, where it's not too hidden, but if you are coming from the south to the northern part of Bloodtide Coast and specifically running along this area, you will most likely miss the spot. And if you're running from the north to south, it is still a chance that you will miss the spot, but there's a little opening in the wall that you can see and come into this area to find this stunning location. And there's nothing going on in here except for a guild track objective that will occasionally take guild players here, which not many players even do guild missions in Guild Wars 2, especially nowadays. But it's just a really random part of the map that doesn't really have anything else going on outside of that guild track, and because of that, it's just one of my favorite spots in Guild Wars 2, because it's so incredibly detailed and so incredibly useless, and I just love locations like that in video games in general, especially in Guild Wars 2. And it's just a very nice Savari themed area that you can come to relax for a little bit. And the number 2 spot is Triple Trouble. Also located in Bloodtide Coast, this is an iconic road boss, first introduced in the Living World Season 1 that many players should be very familiar with, especially if you did the recent Fractal Incursion, which takes players to this area for a bonus achievement. But this is just an absolutely incredible road boss that I love a lot, and I have done this road boss many times, where there are 3 different jungle worms that you can fight in 3 different parts of the Bloodtide Coast, and this requires players to split up into the 3 different areas as a part of 3 different groups, and each group and each team has to coordinate together in order to kill the worm at the same time, in order to decapitate all 3 worms, to then have each group kill those decapitated worm heads in order to successfully complete this event and get what can be a pretty incredible reward. But I just love the mechanics of this fight a lot, where Crimson is pretty basic and you generally just run in circles, but Cobalt can be really fun, where you have to work as a team in order to grab a powder keg from a few different areas, one of which even includes a little bit of a jumping puzzle before mounts are introduced, and you have to blow up the worm together with the powder kegs. But then we got Amber Worm, which is just so incredible, where you have to kill an abomination where it basically vomits on you, which makes you smell nice to the worm, where then the worm eats you and you can find a fallen adventurer decomposing inside of the worm's stomach that has a spear gun that you can go ahead and pick up to then burst your way out of the worm in order to then shoot the worm with the spear gun in order to weaken it so you can damage it. Yeah, that's just so incredible. I love it so much. Where all the Triple Trouble fights are really cool, but Amber Worm in particular is just my favorite, and is just an incredible piece of content and one of the best pieces of content in Guild Wars 2. But now for the number 1 spot, for my favorite thing in all of the Maguuma Jungle and also Bloodtide Coast, and it has to go to Golem's Lab. This is a jumping puzzle located in Metrica Province, and by saying that word, I probably caused a few people to scream in pain because of how this jumping puzzle can definitely be painful for some players who are playing through Guild Wars 2 for the first time, or just don't particularly enjoy jumping puzzles. But this is one of the harder jumping puzzles in Guild Wars 2, and because of that, I love it so much because I'm someone who absolutely loves jumping puzzles. And while over the years I've had some jumping puzzles that I like more than others, Golem's Lab has just consistently been one of my favorite jumping puzzles in the entire game, and I love coming through this area, exploring it all, and overcoming the challenges so much. Where I definitely remember back in the day struggling with this puzzle, and nowadays it is still pretty easy, but since it is a decently difficult puzzle, I do still mess up every now and then, as many players often do. But just throughout all of the maps that we can find in the Maguuma Jungle and all the different interesting pieces of content and jumping puzzles and mini dungeons and fun events, Golem's Lab for me is just my favorite thing in the entirety of the Maguuma Jungle. And that's my list. I hope you enjoyed. There is a lot of stuff in these maps, so much stuff, where I talked about 30 different things in this video, and I have a pretty long honorable mentions list down in the description. But I would love to hear what your favorite parts of the Maguuma Jungle are, because each player prefers different things. Some people like events, some people like jumping puzzles, some people like pretty mountains, so please let me know yours down in the comments. If you like this type of video, check out my recent videos about the Shiver Peaks or Ascalon. I hope you all are taking great care of yourselves. Have a good one, everyone.